Hey, what's happening, guys? So finally getting around to making this video for Hunter, and it's build advice like I did for Ronin and Samurai before. And this one should be a little shorter and also pretty straightforward, just because Hunter, you can either play a trash Hunter and have whatever, which could be said about every class, but the other option is that you just play to the hunter's strengths, and that usually ends up with being what most people want to do and what most people instinctively gravitate to, even if they don't really know how to optimize their builds. But I have had quite a few people ask me about my hunter build, which is, nothing special, just the basic stuff. And yeah, I'm going to try to make this short, primarily because of that. There's not as much wiggle room as there is for the other classes as far as the elements that are at play, all the stats and techniques that are usable. But also because I was, as you probably saw, I've been getting a lot into Elden Ring, which I hadn't really after the initial month or 2 month period after release, and just trying to get the hang of it and just understand the technique, not just the builds, but also like the technique that people use in PvP and PvE, and like how all the stats work and all that. So doing that, I came across this YouTuber who has this really neat, really short videos about advice for every Ash of War, every talisman, all the sorceries, all the incantations, and he just gives you like these really short bursts of information that's not evident, but it's so valuable. So that's what I'm going to try to do. I'm going to try to go for brevity with this one, which is not usually what I do. I end up just rambling on too much. So let's get into it. So first, the techniques. We have your first, everything that's on the left, of course, is going to be what's unlocked by default. So you won't have any options in the beginning until you start ranking up. And so you start by having staggering arrow, and then you get executioner rank 2, and then you get resupply rank 3, and pinpoint rank 5. And those ranks go relatively fast, just playing a few matches or doing a few stories. Um, but yeah, so that's kind of what you have in the beginning, so there's no choice. But as you unlock the whole tree, you'll see that, uh, especially as you play the game, you'll see that most people go for explosive arrow, which is by far one of the hunter's main and best features. And with this, you could go with the double legendary on the first perk, which is great for a kunai. If not, I wouldn't really do anything else. I would just do Hunter Unleashed if I'm not going with a double legendary. Executioner can be useful. I usually don't. I usually just prefer to have my down arrow, but there are people that make it useful because they, when they're building old, they'll pop their smoke, and you're within that 12-meter range to make good use of this. So a lot more DPS that way, but it's not really something that I ever have done. So Scent of Blood, not really useful. Like you're not going to be doing a lot of assassinations as a hunter. So even though it is nice, it's super cool to have the skipping stone with the 100% increase in reload and draw speed. It's actually pretty freaking awesome. But you're not going to be going around assassinating people. So Hunter Unleashed is one of the better options. I would say the better one if you're not doing double legendary, um, by far. And then you have resupply, which it gives you 30% of all ammo types, and it costs one resolve. It's trash. Usually the first technique point on perk 2 is garbage, um, for all classes. And then you have status damage, which is again what you're gonna want to go with by far. Like out of all these, it's the best one. Piercing arrow, and for obvious reasons because it synergizes with your fire arrows and your explosive arrow. Piercing arrow is kind of, I mean, if you're doing immunity, it can be like during immunity week, it can be useful because you can do status effects. So, and then you can just equip a bow with helmet piercing and headshot refund and then have shield piercing arrows. So that could be useful. Bow and blade sounds like a cool thing, like a cool idea. It would be cool if it applied to the next, bow attack as opposed to, you know, arrow attack, which makes it really specific. So your next arrow will have will do 100% more damage. Now, this could be useful if you're using your explosive arrow, but it would be awesome if you could have it with your ult. So your ult, it's only going to apply to one of the 5 headshots, as opposed to all of them. And that's if you're running all-seeing eye. And if not, you're just gonna, it's just gonna apply, to 1 out of 3 headshots. But yeah, you could use this, I guess, during immunity. Otherwise, not really. You're not gonna be like doing a lot of melee if you're an effective hunter. So yeah, I would say probably piercing arrow is the best one during immunity. Pinpoint was actually great for me in the beginning when I wasn't really comfortable getting headshots. It's pretty useful to just aim for a body shot, and usually I think it procs. In my experience, it procs more than 50% of the time. So, yeah, it's great. But as you move along and start getting more experience, I think definitely all-seeing eye is the technique to go for with. And yeah, I mean, this is self-explanatory. That it has the potential of getting 10 headshots, although it did get nerfed after that one update. I forget which version of the app it is, but yeah, relatively one of the last updates where they nerfed the ricochet to be another headshot all the time. Now it's like sometimes. I don't know what the percentages are, but yeah. Legendary on perk 3 is pretty much the worst thing you can do, um, because yeah, it's just the other options that are just so much better. Yeah, or if you're running like a triple legendary, those are, kind of joke builds because you just lose so much of your firepower with any class. So usually, I've said this before, don't take the triple legendary or don't take your second legendary on this slot on perk 3 because it's going to hurt you. Burning Gaze can be actually pretty useful, even though it's only, it puts you back at 3 headshots. But if you got a lot of fire damage on your build, then you can make it work, especially for story or anything where there's attuned enemies, because the damage output can bypass, uh, you know, the buff, so it can act as a debuff sometimes. Okay, so let's take a look at this build that I have on, which is my standard um, soloing build. You got your blessed arrows for heals. Um, I really like the FoulMaster, which is foul arrows, and Fire Master, but it's really you don't really feel you know that much of a difference because Hunter is just so powerful. But it does, it does make a difference, but it's like not as much as you would expect because you already have. I mean, it stacks really well with the status effect damage, to have that extra 25%. But a lot of times it ends up just being overkill. So unless you're going for, like a solo speed run, and you have to be like crazy good to not, get hit. But that's just like really high level. So most of you guys, I would assume, watching this video are looking to get some sort of, you know, grasp on how to build your hunter. So I've said this before with the katana. I usually go with melee stagger because I do Moonmaster cancel. So I usually go with melee stagger damage. If I'm not, for a class that's like Ronin or Hunter, where I'm not really doing a lot of melee fighting, I usually do melee stagger damage because I want to stagger my enemies faster with Moonmaster. I know a lot of people, and it's a really good alternative to have a perfect parry window in that slot. But I've said this before. I don't like the fact that it took me so long to learn how to perfect parry every enemy, and I feel like having that with one class is gonna throw off my timing. So with the rest of the classes, so that's the main reason I don't use it. With the flame, pretty self-explanatory. It can let you bypass shields and everything. Um, Enemies with a strong, um, stagger bar or anything like that. You don't have to really worry about them. Yeah, it's just it can in a pinch when you need to get rid of an enemy quick, you can burn through their health faster. So yeah, that's usually I go with Way of the Flame. Um, and then the skipping stone. Usually I go with range damage and reload speed, especially because you need that reload speed for Hunter, because you need to learn how to do the bow animation cancel to get your ultimate faster and get headshots faster. So yeah, look that up. I know that Joey Dominguez has a tutorial on how to do that. There's also the original tutorial that I saw for the bow animation cancel technique was this guy, Highburn UK, which he doesn't play anymore, but his YouTube is called Twin Ponchos, and you can still find that video, the original video. He was one of the first people that I ever saw, way, way, way in the beginning of Legends, doing this technique, and he explains it really concisely. So I think that's also a good alternative. It would be cool to give him some views. Just you know, it's cool to see that the game is still alive and people are still looking up how to do stuff. So ultimate damage, double ultimate damage is really really popular with Hunter just because the potential to delete a bunch of like a whole crowd. If basically like if you have double ultimate and you have everything like meaning you have your ult ready, you have your smoke, you have your explosive arrow, like there's really not a lot that's going to be standing still after you unleash everything. So even the tankiest of waves will most likely be deleted if you have everything and you have your build maximized and optimized. So yeah, so that's what I would recommend for that. So as far as the skipping stone, I'm skipping ahead. So as far as the skipping stone, um, pretty common advice, for the new maps. The both of the new maps are newer, I guess. The ones that got added afterwards, Blood and Steel and Twilight and Ashes. You're gonna want to go with helmet piercing. But I mean, you could go with shield piercing as well because there are a lot of shield enemies, but there are more helmeted enemies. So and then the classic maps, usually there's more enemies with shields, so you would want to go with shield piercing, and this is if you're soloing, because usually if I'm going with the full team, I do both helmet piercing and shield piercing because ammo is usually not an issue. Everybody's running munitions, and there's ammo pickups, and there's most of the maps have the refill to be purchased, so ammo is usually not a problem for me if I'm with a team. But if I'm soloing, you do need the headshot refund. Um, so range damage is a nice boost to your ult, and just generally every time you're, you know, just getting those quick headshots, it comes in handy. So mm, you could go with draw speed, but I just like range damage. Draw speed is basically another version of range damage because the longer you draw your bow, the more damage you're gonna do. But then again, it's like a trade-off. So because you're still having to do the bow animation cancel, so it's not gonna be like a long draw. So give or take, I would say it's probably about the same. Um, as for the charm, usually go with blessed arrows, foul arrows for soloing, ult damage, and hunter ability radius is going to be your bread and butter for hunter because you do every time you use your ability, you want to get a headshot and you want to have that 100% radius increase to get as many enemies as you can. Actually, it's pretty powerful. It can delete most of the wave if it's a weaker wave. If you have kunai, you can just clean up with kunai afterwards, or just get a few more headshots and be done with fire arrows. If you're going with kunai, this is pretty standard for all classes: ghost weapon damage, cooldown reduction on kill, hidden blades, and supermassive. It's just because supermassive will stop any oncoming attack, even if it's the Oni slam, even if it's the most powerful enemy. I don't care who it is. It's going to stop him on their tracks. And hidden blaze is just for that multi-target damage, which is great. The spread can be the way that it fans out can cover a pretty big distance. So yeah, pretty self-explanatory, pretty basic stuff. For your smoke, you want to go with double cooldown reduction, definitely, because it's a part of your bread and butter as well. With Hunter, you pop your smoke, get headshots, build ult, delete. Um, but you can go, since the nerf to resolve gains from headshots for Hunter, which you used to only need 6, you know, before that update. Now you need 8. So sudden resolve, you know, comes in handy for that, to kind of offset that nerf. So you pop your smoke, you already have one resolve, and then you just get a few more headshots, and then you got ult. People were running lucky before that, just because it's nice to have multiple smokes always, as a hunter especially. Munitions, you're definitely going to need munitions. So that's kind of like, you don't really mess with that one stat. But yeah, you could go with lucky, but I think you benefit more from learning to use sudden resolve. And I know, because I was resistant to the idea of having to time my smoke every time that I had no resolve, so that I could make use of that one, because it only fills up the first resolve. It doesn't fill up the second or third if you already have resolve. So, but yeah, it's like everything. Once you get used to it, it's fine. So let's see. As far as the other stuff you could go with, for a ghost weapon one, you could go with sticky, and this is pretty much the standard sticky that you're going to want to use for hunter. Cooldown reduction on kill, status effect duration, increase radius, and fired up, because you want to throw that at a cluster of enemies and get as much resolve as you can from that. That's why you have the increased radius. And the status effect duration, it really helps with it synergizes well with the status effect damage and all your fire damage that you might have, from depending if you're running FoulMaster or whatever else. But yeah, and then the fired up. Alternatively, you could go with this if you're speed running, and if it's a map like Twilight where you don't really need your sticky like every wave, you can just buff it up with ghost weapon damage, and it's basically the same for all the other stats. So you can alternatively go with just a regular epic kunai, basically the same thing. You can add status effect duration instead of the cooldown reduction and kill, or you can have a fired up one, depending on what you're doing. The fired up ones synergize well with the fire ult for, like I said, for story when there's attuned enemies. Um, just because it stacks that fire damage and that status effect, and it can burn through the debuff. Um, what else? Dearth throw, it's very niche. I do have one, I think, for each class, but wouldn't really recommend that. You can mess with that, but not really. You don't really want. I do have, caltrops for hunter. It's just, when I'm messing around trying to do something different, but you don't really want to go with caltrops for hunter. It can buff your ghost weapon damage if you're running with kunai, especially spirit kunai. So it's nice to have that additional ghost weapon damage, so you can get potentially more kunai kills and reset your cooldowns, but not really. And especially if you're just beginning as a hunter, you're gonna want to go with smoke. So this is the other smoke I was talking about. As far as the charms, like I was saying, there's this soloing charm, and then this is my sort of, if I'm not soloing. So if I'm going with the full team, especially if I'm doing speed run, this is what you're going to want to go with. Ultimate damage, ability radius, foul arrows, and fire master because it maximizes your damage output. And what's the other option? So you could also go with Oni damage. Let's see. Do I have another one with Oni? I should have another one with Oni. I think I only have the soloing one. So something like this could also be useful if you're running double Oni instead of double ult, because it's always, it's nice to have that 20% damage across categories for Oni. So yeah, this is going to apply to any kind of damage to Oni, and it's nice to have a lot of times. But for the most part, I think the other one is what you're gonna want to go with. Fire damage, fire master, foul arrows, ability radius, and ultimate damage. Now you can do something like this for immunity week where you don't have any status effects. Ultimate Oni, resolve increase, and combat region, which is nice, especially if you're speed running. It's nice to have that combat region. And so basically for anything that's soloing, you can also alternatively go. I mean, I think blessed arrows is the best thing to do, but if you're not too comfortable, you can also add combat region or uh, in, health increase. While you get used to the flow of soloing, and that gives you a nice, you know, it gives you just like a nice cushion as far as taking damage, and in healing and all that, as opposed to having that foul arrows debuff of 25%. But yeah, there's a couple other. I mean, for call it incapacitated weeks, you can have ability cooldown reduction. Depending if you're, especially if you're speed running, you're you're gonna need that down arrow to be back as soon as possible. You can also stack it up with a katana ability cooldown reduction, so you have two. That gives you about the same regular time for your down arrow to come back. What else? And there's like a couple of niche builds that you can make with Hunter. You could do double reload speed. That's actually really good if you're really good at the bow animation cancel. You can get your ult super fast with the double reload speed. Um, and I think one of the biggest takeaways that I expect you guys um, get from this is that you can basically switch out foul arrows and fire master to sort of you know fit your style. So if you're going to be running blessed arrows regardless of what you're doing, you could switch out foul arrows or fire master just because they're both really powerful. And it's going to be about the same. It's just going to depend on the main difference is how you're using your resources. Um, but other than that, there's really not a lot of experimentation room for Hunter. The last thing that I would mention is the the alternative speed running build for Hunter, which is going to look something like this. And this is for maximum damage output. So you're going to want that double fire damage and then Oni damage. Oh, let me switch back to Ultimate Man. Or you could even do something like this. So you could have double Oni damage or you could have one ultimate damage on the katana and then double fire damage and then foul arrows. And so this is going to be really powerful. This is basically going to melt any non-Oni enemies upon impact of the explosive arrow. Um, and then also if you pair it up with the sticky, it's going to be, yeah, it's going to delete anything that's in front of you. But yeah, that's about it for the basic advice. Next, I'm just gonna edit some different builds into the video just for you guys to see, alternatives. There's also, and this goes for any class, there's also a restorative rhythm build for hunter. That's pretty useful because it's basically your basic hunter charm that you're gonna want to go with if you're trying to go for maximum damage. But now it gives you the ability to not only heal yourself but heal your teammates. And hunter doesn't really sacrifice that much if you're taking a double legendary. So yeah, this is also pretty good support build for a really powerful hunter that also heals. But yeah, I'm gonna put those up next, and I'm gonna try to show some gameplay to show the the difference that there is between one build and another. Thanks for checking this out. Okay, so never mind. I was editing the video and I realized that I didn't cover the other two class abilities. So let's take a quick look into it. Staggering Arrow is going to be your main option for Platinum 7 and for Immunity Week. And that's basically because during Immunity Week you don't have any other options that are viable. And this technically should not work because it's a sort of a status effect, but it does work because otherwise the hunter would not have a viable class ability. These two, because they're status effects as well with fire, they're basically nullified during immunity. So it's going to be that for. It's also going to be your best option for, in my opinion, anyway, for Platinum 7 because with the aggressive foes modifier, it's really difficult to get out of the way and or dodge some attacks because of the hyper tracking. So especially the Oni Slam, the Oni Lord, if you're caught in the middle of it, it can one-shot you. So it this at least lets you stop them on their tracks if you have, your ability ready or help, um, you know, a fellow teammate if you see that they're about to get caught because of course shared wounds makes it to where it's if one takes a lot of damage everyone takes a lot of damage. So the other option is Spirit Archer, which is not really that great. The AI is significantly dumber than that of the, for example, the Spirit Archers that you can buy from the shop at Blood and Steel. And so yeah, I've noticed that it gets caught if there's an enemy and there's like like a ramp or any sort of elevation, it won't attack. Sometimes it just freezes in place, and it also seems to be too dumb to realize that an enemy is behind a rock or something like that. So it'll just like stand in place if the enemy is not within you know the direct field of vision of the archer. It seems to be that he won't register the presence of the enemy. So for some reason they did it like that, whereas the spirit archers from the shop at Blood and Steel are much more aggressive. So it would have been nice if the AI had been the same, but for obvious reasons, I guess maybe it would have been too OP. Um, but it's fun. It's useful for like fun runs or like meme runs. What I've done is if you go to Blood and Steel with all hunters with the Spirit Archer, you have potentially four archers all the time, just running around, kind of getting whatever they can get. And then if you buy the archers at the shop, and then you wait for 3 waves for the cooldown of the purchase to reactivate, you can activate them back to back. So that means that you buy them, wait for 3 waves, use them, immediately buy them, and use them again, and you'll have 6 archers, and then everybody else running archers. So that's 10 right out of the gate. And then potentially if you're running Spirit Kunai, you could have reset your cooldowns and have multiple archers at the same time. So that would be, 12, 14. I think we've gotten it to 14 one time. So it's pretty hilarious to see what the 14 archers can do, which is wreak havoc on the enemies. So yeah, that's the other option. And without further ado, let's go and take a look at the builds.